Hi guys, I wanted to give you a little update. I'm in the hospital in Norway and I've sustained a lot of injuries, lots of cuts to my face and head. I had surgery today on my arm. Doesn't look so pretty. And I have like lacerations all over my legs. But I think I have a fracture in my foot and maybe in my rib. But for the most part, I'm okay and I'm alive. I fell 30 meters from a ridgeline in Tromsø, the Skyrace. So I'm pretty lucky to be here with the injuries that I have. So thanks for your support.
Look at that. Episode 304 of A2 the show. We've been doing this 304 days now and traveling around the world, different guests around the world. Our first guest from Colorado. Welcome, Hillary, on the show.
Yeah. Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. And Hillary, do you want to tell us what sport you do?
Yeah, so I would say ultra endurance athlete, but primarily it's trail running and gravel cycling, but trail running, like mountainous terrain. So like it's like ultra marathon. So like 30 right. miles.
I want to stop you. So what's the difference between an endurance athlete and an ultra endurance athlete?
Exactly. So endurance is like normally like, marathons or something like this. Like you think like a marathon, like a long distance runner, like an endurance runner. But ultra endurance is like on the order of days, like that you continue to move. So for me, it's like a 30 miles is where I start. And then it can go all the way up to 100 miles, like through the mountains. And yeah, some of those races kind of take days at a time, depending on how steep and hilly the course is. Like, yeah.
And you like the hills? That's why they call you the Hillygoat?
Yep, exactly. That's why.
You just carry around a tent with you as well so that you can, camp on the spot?
Actually, sometimes I do that. Sometimes I do carry like I like fast pack, or I go on kind of a lot of times for training runs, I'll have like a backpack with me and I'll have all of my things that I need to sleep outside carrying with me, and I'll like stop along the trail, so I'll do maybe 30 miles a day for 4 days at a time.
Oh, wow. All right, this is a normal thing happening in Lebanon. This always happens. Power's out. Yeah, sounds good.
How long have you been doing that?
How
long have you been an ultra endurance
athlete? So actually not as long as you would think. I mean, I've been an athlete my whole life, but I played tennis in college. But I just started these ultra distance marathons like 2012. So I've only been doing them for, I don't know, like nine years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just started doing them competitively, like with the North Face in 2015. So 6 years.
What was that like when you signed up with North Face and you started?
I thought it was a dream. I mean, I have a master's degree in neuroscience and physiology. And so I was literally in graduate school and I was like, I was in a PhD program. And I was like doing experiments, and I remember taking this call on my lunch break to talk to the athlete manager. And I just like, had like 15 minutes and like danced in the hallway before I like went back into lab to like finish my experiments. So it was like kind of surreal, but and now that's actually part of why I decided to get my master's degree, is so I could kind of do the athlete thing and the scientist thing.
Oh, wow. And where do you think that'll carry you in the future? So what do you hope to do with neuroscience and athletes?
It's really interesting because I'm a chemist by training. Like biochemistry and chemistry is where I excel at. And so neuroscience, the side of like the human side of things, like the thing that you don't really understand, like human emotions and like things like this, they confuse me and I don't like them. because I can't explain them. Or there's just this ambiguity that I don't really like.
But you study them, so now you know them, right? Because neuroscience, you understand how.
Yes, but I understand like the chemistry, but like, if like one day it's like the weather in Colorado, like it's sunny and 75 degrees, and then it's going to be like snowing the next minute, you never know. But my point is that through kind of the past several years of being an athlete, and especially 3 years ago I had a really traumatic accident and I had this huge recovery period. It's the mental side of being an athlete, and that kind of like positive affirmations, like how you reframe things, that's what interests me. And so I think in the future, after I'm done competing, and I'll be an athlete my whole life, but maybe not a competitive one, and I really hope to kind of go into the field of mental health and maybe sports psychology, so use my neuroscience degree in that way.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so you mentioned
awesome.
An accident.
Yeah.
Can you put us a little through it, like what happened, and
if you're fine talking about it?
Yeah, if you want to.
And what I want to ask you also on top of that is, so since you're studying neuroscience, you must know about pain. Was that experience the most painful experience for you? And did you learn anything about pain during it?
Yeah. So, okay, I'll start by explaining, and then I'll kind of go into that too. So as I mentioned, I was doing kind of both things. So I would teach in, at a small college in Boulder, and then I would pack up my bags and I would go race, and primarily in Europe, to do like my trail running kind of races. And so in 2017, I was racing in this World Skyrunning series, which is like pretty technical mountain running, these ultra distance events. And I was in Norway, and I was competing in this race. I was actually winning the World Skyrunning series, and I was about halfway on this ridge line. And in these races, you kind of run on these exposed terrain. It's like just ridges, and it's stuff that I'm very comfortable on, but something kind of just happened that day. I stepped on a rock, and as I stepped on the rock, it fell, and I couldn't even register that I had tripped. I was just, before I knew it, the horizon was like upside down and I was falling. And I still have the dream today about, I was observing myself as I was falling and telling myself to stay calm, telling myself that this was it, that I was, falling to my death. And then I remember like impacting the side of the mountain, like just jostling, like feeling the sensation that my bones were breaking. I didn't really feel pain at that point. It wasn't until I woke up on the side of the mountain after I had fallen 150 feet, so about 50 meters. And then that's when the pain kind of started. But in total, I had broken 14 bones and a major ligament in my foot. And it was so severe that I was told I would never run again. So I was told that it was like my career was in fact over. And that's what happened. And so then of course, like there's, from that moment, everything changed. And then, then there's a whole slew of, things that we can talk about as far as like recovery. But as far as pain goes, no, it wasn't the most painful thing I've ever experienced, because this is the crazy thing about neuroscience and about how powerful your mind and body is. You block it out. So yes, it was painful, but like, I don't distinctly remember that feeling. I just remember the world was like throbbing in and out, kind of more just like a sensation that it was just like too much to bear, that I would kind of like fade in and out of consciousness. So I didn't have anything to like grab onto and hold on to. But I definitely do have a strong pain threshold, because like a few months ago, I had broken my foot and I didn't even know it. And I was like continuing to run on it. So, something has changed, but like, I would say though, there's different kinds of pain. And I think, during my recovery, I went to go see this guy named Levi, and he's a rolfer. And so rolfing is like where it's kind of like somatosensory. So you basically manipulate the skin and try to like facilitate, I don't know, like sensory growth, or kind of, because like on your, basically how you can access the brain is like through your skin. There's so many sensory neurons on your skin. And so I was experiencing a lot of pain because of this, like all these surgical sites, and I was favoring one side of my body. And so I had like a limp, but I necessarily wasn't experiencing pain. It had healed, but I was still favoring it. And so I think like pain can actually take on a psychological side of things too, in the form of trauma. I think that was more painful. Is like, I still have that dream that's like vividly there. And I think that's more of a kind of like a psych, like something that's deeper in your psyche, like this pain that's there.
Yeah, and how do you deal with that when you favor one side on your walking? Because like I kind of have that since I got a football injury in my left knee, and I tore 2 ligaments in it, and injured my ACL. So sometimes I feel like my left side annoys me, and then there's like pressure on my right side because I favor my right side due to that injury. So like, how do you deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, so, and especially as an athlete too, because, ultra endurance, it's like repetitive motion. I'm doing this thing. So any sort of imbalances they present themselves in the form of injuries. But your body's also very smart. So you're able to function kind of with that limp because maybe one side is compensating for the other. And so basically what I had to do is, I was in PT, like it was just like a full-time job. I was going to see a physio like all the time, to try to correct those imbalances. But there's some things that, still can't be corrected for. When I was falling, I was tomahawking, and I teach intro to physics. And so normally the center of mass is moving slightly slower than the extremities. Like if something that's further out from the center of mass. So take that to be my arms and my legs. And so I was tomahawking so fast that my shoes actually flew off of my feet. And that's to say that my ankles were just severely twisted. And so even 3.5 years later, I'm still dealing with kind of the scar tissue that is built up. And there's differences in mobility on those sides. And for me, it's just a constant kind of battle of maintenance and literally going to the physio to strength train and do things that are not necessarily running, but things that help my body stay strong in order to run. Yeah.
And did it have an effect? Yeah. I was just going to ask you, did it have an effect on your perspective after, in terms of competing? Do you still compete now? Do you still train as hard?
Yeah. So, it shifted everything, honestly. And during my recovery, I had to kind of let go of the idea that I would compete again. I had no idea if I was even going to be able to run again. And kind of letting go of that, it allowed me to try and to do it only because I wanted to, not because I had to get back to sport or had to get back to competing. And I have gotten back to competing, and I'm still sponsored by the North Face.
Yeah.
And I'm still, I've actually been able to win races and, be a competitive athlete again. But I've had to change how I train. It's not, it's not the same. So now I say, I'm a gravel, I cycle, I ride a bicycle a lot. That's part of my training.
Yeah.
I'm in the gym a lot. So it's not just running. Yeah.
Cool. I want to ask you about endurance and what makes you endure running for days and days and days versus me. If I try running for an hour, I get tired and I give up. Pretty much.
Well, sometimes depending on how fast I'm running, an hour is good enough for me too. So, and I think, everyone's built differently. And of course, it's I practice these things a lot. But for me, it's just something that feeds the soul. I feel so happy. And also there's tricks that you should know is that, when you're trail running, you can actually hike. when it's really steep, you can just power hike up the hill. I mean, I can power hike pretty fast, but like I can get out of breath, but it's just, for me, it's what's motivating is like this curiosity to see like where I can take my own, like me and my own 2 feet, if I can kind of get up to these peaks. And also another secret is that you just bring snacks along. And so
something I wanted to okay, yeah,
like, do you enjoy it more when it's outdoor than when you have to train inside a gym? Like, say you're doing trail hike.
That's what's super hard about like the recovery process too, is because I had to be in a gym all the time. And I really like, this is part of the reason why I love trail running, is because I get to be outside in nature. And that's what keeps me kind of going back, is because I think being outside, at least for me, is something where I feel the most connected to like every single cell in my body, to, you know, to every single cell and like, thing that's outside. And it's something that keeps me creative. It's a way that I can experience like the physical world, but also kind of the scientific world, because I see the world through this weird lens of chemistry. Yeah. So being outside is like what makes it extra special for me.
So you know what? I just want to comment on that, because I feel like a lot of people get so bored nowadays with just so many like random things. We have a lot of distractions, our phones, our devices, and everything.
Yeah.
But you're just running around the hills, just looking at bugs, thinking of the chemistry of bugs as you're running about.
Yeah, literally, it's like the most fun. It's the most fun thing, and I don't know. Like I always just assume that people notice it. Like today, I went on a bike ride. And I was like, I noticed like literally I was avoiding like the bugs that were on the trail. Like I saw a beetle that was like smashed and it made me sad. So it's like when I saw another beetle, I made sure to avoid him. You know, and it's also like springtime. So there's frogs and toads coming out. So I saw one squished on the road. And so it made me really sad. Yeah. But I noticed all these things. Like I noticed little spiders. I don't discriminate either.
And the person who squished the toad didn't notice it. Pretty much.
Yeah, I'm probably sure that they didn't. But like, and even like the creepy crawly things, like even if it's like snakes or like spiders and things like that, like I like those too.
Something I wanted to comment on, you mentioned how people are built different. I want to go into details on that point about, since you have a master's in neuroscience, like, so obviously from a neuroscience standpoint, do you think, like, what can you tell us biologically and like physiologically, how different are people? You know, how are they built different? What makes us different?
So I think, first of all, I'll start physiological, because I think, I mean, there's a certain trainability to, you know, to doing certain sports. Now, I think someone's physiology can cut them out for a shorter distance sport, more so than an endurance sport. For instance, so I always think about like hydration. So like if I'm going to be out for long, multiple day or like a long day event running, and I'm sweating, right? I have to be able to have enough water, right? Drink. And so, and it depends. And also when you sweat, you have salt that comes out. You know, we're basically just a sack of like saline solution. So, you know, when you sweat, it's not only just water, it's also sodium content, some other like potassium, some other things like this too. And so what I have, just based on my physiology, that might actually make me better at endurance sports, is I actually sweat out less salt. And if you think about it, that's actually an advantage if I want to do an endurance sport. Because think about it, like if I sweat so much salt, like maybe compared to someone else, if they sweat so much more salt than me, and we are both running the same pace, you know, we're the same size, sweating out the same quantity of water, but his has, or hers has more salt, by hour 5, they're going to need to replenish not only their water, but their electrolytes. And if not,
I knew it. That's why you That's why I'm losing. I knew it. I sweat too much. I should have known. I swear.
Maybe it's your physiology. So I have an advantage just because of that. And that's something that you actually can't really train. It's just kind of part of your physiology.
Genetics, right?
It is. And so people have always like, my dad's a food science human nutritionist. He's a scientist. And so, there's all this data about like, okay, like don't eat a lot of salt in your diet, but actually like it causes like hypertension or heart disease. That's actually false. But like what happens is like, so what I'm saying, your physiology. So I don't really crave that many salty foods, but someone else who actually has a higher sweat salt concentration, they're going to crave salty foods because their body, their physiology knows they need to replenish it. So that's what I'm saying. You can train that a little bit, but still, once you hit the 5-hour mark or whatever mark, according to your physiology numbers, that person is going to need more electrolytes than me, right? If I have a lower concentration of salt in my sweat. And so you can't really get around that. Now, the mental side of things, there's a trainability to that, and maybe someone is born tougher. I would just argue that that's like a trainability. It's like maybe someone has practiced using that muscle more, so they're more able to problem solve than someone else. So I think like the mental toughness that it requires for these ultra endurance feats, like you can train that, you can practice it.
So you've been competitive for a while now, right? Like you've had to compete in many events, you've had to participate. And so I've been competitive in a few domains in my life as well. And what I noticed is it has a toll on my mental health. I can get really frustrated about making progress, or I can get really frustrated with hitting plateaus in certain areas. Like how can I not break that? So my question to you is like, when you're dealing with those frustrations, what do you fall back on in terms of competition? What keeps you sane, rather?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, it's this whole idea of balance is that, it's something that I struggle with a lot because I'm a very competitive person. And when I put 100% of my energy into to each endeavor that I do, and so like when I'm injured or, not able to compete or not competing, I have a bad race or, training day or whatever, what I usually fall back on is, the other things in my life that also make me feel accomplished and alive and, things that define me, but aren't conditional, so to speak. They aren't conditioned on my athletic performance, that I still have self-worth and value regardless of, the podium place or like the number I get, the time that I run. And, that to me has always been, like having different aspects like science or, other interests. Writing has been a big outlet for me. And then, because I always think that that's important because, that's the crazy thing with, athletics. And it's almost scary because, everyone's days are numbered, right? And so if you think like you're going to plateau, there's going to be a time in your life where you're not hitting any more of these like, PRs. Yeah. But you're still going to be a person of worth. And like, those are the kinds of things that I think about that help me keep going. And also just like knowing that, it's not linear. Like, it's like this and to get even, so it's like, it's to kind of fall in love with the process, that it's imperfect. And I don't know, what's going to happen tomorrow, but, I'm going to show up and try my best. So.
Nice. Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to hear more about your travels in different places. When you're running terrains in foreign places and countries, is it harder for you? Does it give you a disadvantage, or do you easily adapt to places?
I love it. It's like running, I think, is the best way to explore a new place. So I've run primarily like in Europe. There's, different places that I would like to run, but it's my favorite way to explore a place, either on bike or by foot, running or hiking, because you get to know a place intimately. And one of my favorite places, I went to Greece and I got to run on Mount Olympus, which was literally like the birthplace of mythology. And I was literally like, I got a place for 3 weeks and I was there training before the race. And I was at this little place called the Tochoro. And it was like, you could look at Mount Mitikeas, which is like Mount Olympus, like Zeus's throne. And like, you could see like the big storms like coming in. And I was like thinking to myself, I was like, no wonder the Greeks thought that Zeus was pissed and throwing lightning bolts, because it looks like he's doing that. Like, and, I know. And then like I loved it. And so then like that's the kind of stuff that actually, for me, I think because I'm so curious, it gives me motivation when I'm running, because yeah, like it sucks, it's hard. Like that race was a marathon, so it was 25 miles. It's like 40K, and it was about 3,300 meters worth of climbing.
Oh wow.
And then so like over 10,000 feet of climbing in, like, it was ridiculously hard. But like, you know, I thought about, you know, Greek mythology and like what you know, people were doing here, like back when, you know, they were just like, you know, because we started from this ancient town of Dion when there wasn't like much infrastructure, and like, you know, the Greeks just like spent their days like, you know, attributing their days to the gods. And then the other, like, you know, so for instance like that. And then another race when I was in the Alps in France, and I got to run over this pass between Italy and France in the Alps. And there I had done some training runs there, and this was a pass where they had discovered remains of an elephant. And so this is like from the days of Hannibal, when he literally descended upon Rome from like going up and around and like through the Alps in the dead of winter with a bunch of elephants. And so, you know, I'm thinking to myself, like, I have a hard time right now, but like if the elephants can do it and they're like tropical animals, so can I. So like,
yeah, I remember reading about Hannibal back in school. Oh god, those and then you lived it, you know, you're just like, you're passing by, it's like, yeah, Hannibal was
must be so amazing going to see those places. Where else would you like to go run and travel?
Oh man, I mean, everywhere. I mean, everywhere that I haven't been. Like I would, so it's such an impossible question to answer, because it's like, I mean, there's even places in my home in Colorado where I haven't even explored. And I mean, I could tell you stories about this too, and about, you know, like different areas of Colorado where there's different history of like, you know, the mining culture and like all of this kind of stuff here. You know, like in the San Juan Mountains, you know, I mean, I've never been to, you know, New Zealand, Japan, lots of parts in Asia, you know, where I haven't run. And I would love to explore the culture and the mountains there. But then also, you know, when you put a magnifying glass on a place, like even in the Alps, even though I've been to the Alps many times, like, you know, the Italian Alps, the Swiss Alps, the French Alps, but like if you put a magnifying glass, there's so many towns and like nooks and crannies that, you know, like really interesting places. So I try to, you know, dream big and like have like, you know, South America as a place that I want to go explore more. But then, you know, to try to make the most of like my exploration at the places that I do visit, because there's so much to explore. It's just kind of a matter of perspective.
Right. True.
Yeah. Something I wanted to ask you, like I actually already asked you this question, and you
Repeat
said you
question.
No, I asked you on Instagram. This is how we first. Yes, I was asking you, what is the impact? What impact does the thrill of adventure have on someone's creativity, in your opinion? And you said you can answer it from the neuroscience perspective and from your own personal experiences. So if we can have both of those.
So I think we're all like very creative people. I mean, I think the more that we know from like a neuroscience perspective is like the better we operate as humans, the more kind of like breaks that we have. Like we can't just, you know, it's also ironic because I felt like in grad school I was working 60, 70 hours a week, and I was actually getting less creative. But every time I'd kind of go and have like a run, I would have these bursts of creativity. And so I think of that always, so this is the neuroscience part of it, like from a movement perspective. When you go out for a run or a bike ride or even a walk, usually your eyes, it's like kind of this like repetitive motion. And this repetitive motion, for instance, is like in your limbs. It's activated in a part of your brain at the back. It's the cerebellum. And this repetitive motion, it's almost kind of like methodical, right? And in combination with that, for something that's a bit faster paced, like cycling or definitely running, your eyes scan. So they go up and down and then side to side. And this is something that is mimicked in, you know, REM sleep. That's this rapid eye motion. And it's like, basically it's almost, it's like therapeutic. It's like a meditative state. And there's some like, basically downstream pathways that kind of like help kind of almost refresh or restore you. And I think that is what helps you kind of process like your like deeper learning processing. And REM sleep is actually associated with like emotional and like and deep thinking kind of processing. And it's actually not as like it's the second like deepest layer of sleep. And so like that's what I think of is when like adventure or like movement, right? And yeah, like kind of like things that stimulate you.
You know what? Sorry to interrupt you. When I feel stimulated, when I go on like traveling and adventures and stuff, I feel time slows down a lot. I feel like an hour goes by a lot, and I feel like it's very slow versus like on my regular day-to-day, I feel like it goes by too fast.
Yeah, and I think so that's also too is because like you're in a new place, and so you have to be more like, we're animals, we have to be more kind of in tune with our surroundings, and so we're more observant, and so it's like new stimuli that are coming to us at a day-to-day even though it's still an hour, it might feel like it's a bit like longer because it's new, and so you're responding to it, and you have to be kind of more just more responsive and
so
more
how to live longer, travel more places, and do more adventures.
Yeah, and like
movement,
honestly, like there's so many books on that for movement and how that increases longevity of life. But also I think that's also it too. It's like keeping your brain young. I mean, we've probably all in the past like 5-10 years heard of like Sudokus and like brain puzzles and things like that. That's just like new thinking, right? And so I think like adventure, travel, like whatever it is, doing something new, it can keep you engaged, and it can keep you like your brain is like, if you've heard this like plasticity, your brain is like learning and adaptive, and so you just need new stimuli to kind of make it work. Yeah.
I mean, from a chemical perspective, since you're like chemically inclined, I mean, everything tries to aim towards entropy. So like the higher like energy states, the higher chaos. So and one philosophical idea that I have sometimes is that meaning is defined collectively by just by looking around at what's happening. And when you look around at what's happening, it's kind of tending towards adventure on its own. So then on the individual level, it's kind of the same thing. You have to, meaning is found through the adventure, through the growth, whether it is on a deep psychological level, on a personal level, or something external.
Yeah, absolutely. And seriously, Amir, you said my like favorite quote ever. Actually, not quote, but it's my favorite law in science. And it's the second law of thermodynamics. It's entropy is increasing. That's like literally what explained me falling off the cliff, is because chaos is increasing, and it's like more energetically favorable for me to like be in a disordered state than
yeah. So now a new Hillary is born. Yeah.
Whoa.
Out of it.
And it's like, I don't know, it's the whole perspective too about like, entropy is like increasing. So like chaos, like a more disordered state. I mean, that kind of seems scary, but I mean, it's also just like what adventure brings, or what like new experiences bring. They bring about change, and that can seem scary, and it's like maybe a little bit more messy, but it's actually more beautiful. And it's how I want to experience the world, because it keeps you guessing and like more interactive with the world around you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I have a question. You've talked about like how biking or walking might get you into that meditative state. So do you do any yoga or like pranayama or breathing exercises?
Yes. And so actually, I mean, I'm very bad at like meditation, like sitting still. So, but yes, I do have to do this. But I actually think the one thing that helps me is the focusing on the breathing. Because I think it gives you something to focus on. And like for me, sometimes my mind just goes different places, but if I do that, it gives me kind of this internal, and I actually like visualize like if I breathe in, like where the breath is going, like in my body. But yeah, so that's how, but that to me is like more kind of like, a different kind of meditation than actually like running is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The idea of imagining where the breath goes, when you do yoga, they tell you to focus on the muscle that's kind of tense as you do the breath, and it helps it relax. It's a strange thing.
I know. I experience that all the time. It's like you're like breathing into it. but yeah, I think from that perspective, it kind of like, especially when you're focusing on the breath, it like you focus more on the parasympathetic nervous system, like kind of the rest and digest, like the stuff that's more like you don't have to think about, like, you know, your heart beating, you don't have to tell it to beat, it just does, or your digestion, like, and your breath, like your respiration is kind of that as well, versus running is more about like the sympathetic nervous system when you're like, you're telling your muscles to fire and work and all these things. So I think it's good to do both.
Oh, wow. Speaking of rest and digestion, I want to know, what do you eat on your trips when you're running around places? What do you carry along with you?
So my favorite snack of all time is carrots. So I'm always like looking, I love to cook too. So I mean, I like to experience like local food wherever I go. So, you know, going to like a local restaurant or something like this, but, I think the best way is like going in the grocery stores and like seeing what people, like what you cook. But I always have like fresh fruit and produce, like carrots around with me. Like that's my favorite, like travel snack. But yeah, I'm also not afraid to try new things. Like when I ran across Haiti, I tried, my nickname is the Hillygoat. And when I ran across Haiti, I had to eat a goat.
That's awesome. All right, maybe not.
It was really good, actually.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, but when you're running distance for like a race or something, I feel like you can't survive on just carrots, right?
No.
All right, I don't know. I just want to clarify because
no. I mean, sometimes I will bring carrots on like a training run for like at the summit for like the crunch, like the satisfaction, or just like a weird photo. But no, for mostly what I take with me, like I said, I like to cook. So one of my sponsors, it's called Scratch Labs, and he's a friend of mine. And I mean, they sell like little, you know, like there's like little gummy packets or whatever. Like, sure, I can eat that, but my favorite is like real food. And this guy Alan taught me this recipe of like making rice cakes. And so it's really cool because you can like make whatever you want. And this sounds bad until you try it out on a run. But like my favorite rice cakes is you put rice on the bottom, and then in the middle you put little raspberries or like and pieces of chocolate, and then you put like a little bit more rice on top. You can like put it in a ball. And then my other favorite one is like rice with this sounds funny. This sounds weird. Two more favorite ones. One is you put almond butter with like maple syrup, like, and then bacon.
Wow. Okay. Did not see that coming at all.
Try it. And then my other really favorite, that one's for a bike day, because like I usually can't eat the bacon when I'm running, but like for a bike, you can pretty much eat anything. But for running, I really like this one where it's like a little bit of Parmesan cheese, black pepper, and soy sauce in rice. It's really good.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, it sounds like a type of protein shake, but made with rice cake.
Yeah, and the rice is amazing because the rice is really good carbohydrates.
Right.
And so it's quick energy, and it digests really well because rice, like after you cook it in water, it's like, you know, it's a lot of water content, so it helps you absorb it really quickly. And then the other things are kind of just added for like flavor and satiation, like as far as you have like a little like, you know, fat and protein to kind of keep you feeling fed. I'm just thinking about that bacon and maple syrup right now. It's so good.
Honestly,
that's strange. Yeah.
My personal favorite is the rice cakes with the green apples. I think those are so good. Like green apple and like syrup.
Yeah, I love the green apples. Love them.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so when you're on the run, I want to know what else are you like carrying mostly on you? Do you have like a backpack with everything you need? Do you have a tent?
I don't always have a tent if I'm like just going on a training run, but normally in my pack, I mean, if I'm going for like multi-day trips, like I could carry like not a tent, but like a bivvy or like a tarp tent that I could like put up next, like with a tree branch or something. But it's like super lightweight. But the other things I usually take in my pack are like water, obviously. And if I'm going for a long time, I bring like a little water filter. And then my snacks, and then kind of layers. Like I always go in the mountains with, you know, because you're going up in elevation. So I want to bring like a jacket always. And then some gloves and like just some extra layers, and I bring like an emergency blanket. And depending if I'm going like really far away, like a spot tracker, because in the United States, like, you know, you can go pretty far, and it's not like Europe where, you know, like you can run into like a refuge or like a hut and 10 kilometers. In the United States, like, so that doesn't happen. So yeah.
Right.
Well, also, do you usually make these runs alone, or like do you go in groups, or like is there a support team, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a mix. So sometimes I go alone, like especially when I'm traveling and I don't really know that many people, I'll just like go on like all day adventures by myself. Like, and I'll bring a map and, you know, figure out where I'm going. But then also like I love to do long runs with, with people. So that's super fun. So it's kind of a mix.
And the races are, you would have a support team, right? You're not alone.
Oh yeah. So the races, like you have aid stations and, you know, people, if you're trying to go fast, like people that can kind of bring you your things and like do like a whole like NASCAR switch out situation. You can get pretty intense.
Change your shoes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've had it seriously, and I was too sore to like pull down, so like I literally sat there and he like pulled them off for me.
Yeah, because like I was wondering, since some of these races, you said they last over days, and you pack lightly, like where do you keep your stuff around? Like how do you keep getting stuff? Where do you sleep and all of these kind of things? Like,
yeah,
if you don't carry your big backpack with all of the equipment, how do you stack up and like whatever, do your shit?
Well, it depends on the style of the race. Some of them are more self-supported, so there's less like aid. But usually the races that I'm doing, you have like different aid stations where your crew, like people can I'm running on the trail and then they're driving around and like meeting me at certain places where they will give me more food and like more water and anything that I need, like if I need more gear or things like that. So
those lazy ass people don't run.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like it takes a village. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go. I want to go back a little bit, talk about your recovery and your time recovering. I know a lot of people go through injuries and they really have a hard time recovering. You got really injured really hard. People said you wouldn't be able to recover. And look at you right now. So how did you get from one end to the other, pretty much?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's kind of a moving target. So it's something that I'm still, kind of figuring out, because I think no matter, yes, I had some traumatic injuries and, my body heals, and everyone's body heals, but you're never really kind of done. That's not really how life works. I mean, like I've had other injuries since then and other like hardships, and I feel like it's those moments that they teach you that you have, at least they taught me that, I had this inner strength that I just had to find out how to use it. And so now, like if, something else happens in my life, even if it's not the exact same experience, I now have like a confidence to be able to say, okay, like I've gotten through this, like I now know, I have the tools to get through this next hardship, whatever that may be. And so I think that's kind of what I learned. And one of the most important things I learned throughout the recovery process was that I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know the answer, but I basically took it day by day. And I told myself to keep believing that I had the tools to do this. And like, I would literally just take it one day at a time. And then, certain times of reflection to kind of look back and say, okay, wow, like you've made it this far. Now, let's regroup and figure out how to keep going. But that is just, it's not a linear process, and that, it is a process, and you kind of like have the tools and the strength to kind of figure out how to get through it.
Wow, that's really optimistic of you. And I feel like that time was like a lot of time of reflection. Were you also sad during that time?
Oh, yeah. So yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm a very genuine person. So like, I'm mostly genuinely happy, right? So you can experience that today, but
yeah, we could see that.
But like, So what you see is what you get. Like, I'm a really bad liar because like I will tell you how I feel. And so like I joke that like I'm a genuine person, but sometimes you will genuinely experience me pissed off and like genuinely also sad. And those
You're
times,
expressive of your feelings. Yeah.
yeah. And
No, that's an honesty thing. Yeah.
yeah, and exactly that's it. So for me, it's all about honesty. And so I'm only able to have this overall optimistic perspective because I was honest with myself in the times when I felt like shit and I felt like giving up and I didn't feel like myself. I felt like a shell of this person. I didn't know who I was anymore. And every day that I experienced that, and I mean, that was on the order of months, you know, those feelings lasted, you know, daily for over a year. But I still had this overall perspective that it was going to get better. I didn't know when, and this sucked in this current moment, and it wasn't going to prevent me from giving up on myself.
By the way, does this affect your healing rate, this optimistic mindset, like from a neurological standpoint? Does this affect your healing and maybe make you heal faster?
Yeah,
because
I 100% think so.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually really interesting because there's been some scientific studies that have shown if you talk negatively to like rats or mice, that their behavior changes. And rats and mice are very like social creatures. And so if you talk negatively to them, like they'll start to like almost act quote unquote depressed, which is like less social. They'll exercise less. And there's actually been studies that have shown if you talk negatively to like a plant, it actually won't grow as much.
I've seen it with water. I've seen water change to positive and negative thinking.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Holy shit.
I know.
Right.
This is like a lesson for doctors, you know, like be more optimistic, you know,
especially
like the nurses
in Arab
are doing
countries.
their job. Yeah,
especially in Arab countries. You know, Arabs, they have this thing of like, they don't want to make a promise of something good, right? In case they can't fulfill it, right? I mean, it might be common in other cultures too, but I see it a lot here. And so when there's someone that's ill, they're always like scaring them more, like just out of precaution, because they don't want to, you know, promise them anything else. And I think that's horrible, you know?
Me too. And I think actually, and it's the same in the United States, but I think it's maybe different because the reason that they do the same thing is because they're afraid of like getting sued. So they try to like scare you and like, you know, like, okay.
I mean, yeah, like I understand that kind of point where you don't, like, for example, in here in the, like when the doctor doesn't want to give you, you know, that false hope. Okay, maybe in the US is like, so they don't get sued. But for me, also, like sometimes I don't want to give a guarantee to someone if I know I can't keep that promise. You know, like definitely there are times when I know I can do it. Yeah, I'll say if I can make it, I'm going to be there. But if I can't guarantee that I'm going to be there or like be available or whatever, it's kind of hard to give that promise.
But
you know?
sometimes having faith is also huge. And
definitely,
but helped a lot of people.
But doesn't it hurt more? But doesn't it hurt more if you give that promise and then you don't fulfill it?
I don't know.
I think you're always in a position where you don't know what's going to happen either way. You could be 99% set up for recovery and you could make a promise and that could fail as well. So I think because it's such a gamble all the time, you're better off being positive and promising, you know, an optimistic result, because in the end, you never know, right? And if I'm going to gamble on something, I'm going to gamble on what's positive.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard distinction too, because something I struggle with as well. It's like I feel like I value integrity and I value my word, and so it's like I wouldn't want to like make a false promise, but it's also just knowing kind of what Amir said. It's like just you want to try your best, and so I'm gonna like that's what I had to rely on, even though I didn't know the answer. I was like making a promise to myself, and that promise wasn't even associated with an outcome. It was just associated with like doing what made me feel the most fulfilled. And yeah, I think that's the distinction.
Oh, wow. This is, we're kind of running out of time, Hillary, but I do want to ask you before we wrap up here. So first of all, you're a gem from Colorado. That's amazing. I hope you keep doing your thing and keep growing and keep inspiring people to travel around and be curious. And what would you say to someone who wants to be like an athlete doing mountain running or endurance running or anything like that? How does a little kid become Hillary Allen?
Advice. Yeah, what advice would you give?
I would give them 2 pieces of advice, maybe 3. The first would be to stay curious, because I think like that's really what it's all about. Exactly. Like ask questions, you know, like don't like, and that curiosity, that's what should bring the reason. And not like the competition, right? Because I got into running and I had no idea that I was going to be a pro. Like that wasn't the point, but I was curious and I worked hard, and that's kind of what got me somewhere. And the second piece is to don't forget other parts of yourself. That one thing shouldn't and will never be enough. You know, you have to be able to be a well-rounded, fully formed human being and who has multiple interests. And the third thing would be just don't be afraid to try new things. And you might fail, but like I think that's the important part, is to not be afraid to try. Because if you're afraid to fail and you don't even try, like that's, you know, so don't be afraid to try.
Don't be afraid to try.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I'm only 25, and and when I look back on my life, it's like anything that I wanted to try and I haven't done just irritates me to death. Like it's so annoying. So I like to follow that. I would love to, keep that advice in mind. It's so good.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad.
Amazing. Well, this has been another episode of A to the Show. Make sure to subscribe, like, share. Thanks, Hillary, for coming on the show. This is the most diverse, most amazing podcast, #1 trending educational podcast on the planet. Hillary, where can people learn more about you, your book, and more stuff?
I mean, Instagram is a good place to start. Hillygoat _ climbs. That's me. You can just search my name, Hillary Allen. And then I also have a website, hillaryyallen.com, and there's all the good information there for coaching, my book, my blog, like all of this other good stuff. But yeah, that's it.
Check it out. Link in description. All right. Goodbye. See you later, folks. This has been another episode of A to the Show. Goodbye.
Peace.
Ooh.